God's chosen ones. The devil can't destroy you, so he tries to confuse you. There is a truth that often goes unspoken, hidden in the battles we fight silently, the tears we cry behind closed doors, and the deep unrest that stirs in our spirit. Many of us were born into struggle, not because we were cursed, but because we were chosen. Chosen not for comfort, but for calling. Not for popularity, but for purpose. And with that calling comes attention, both divine and demonic. If you are one of God's chosen, you've likely noticed that your life has never been normal. While others seem to glide through seasons untouched, you've walked through storms that nearly broke you. You've felt rejected, misunderstood, even betrayed by those closest to you. But what you might not yet realize is this: you were not being destroyed. You were being prepared. And the fact that you are still standing, still breathing, still seeking, is living proof that the devil couldn't destroy you, no matter how hard he tried. You see, destruction is often the enemy's first plan. But when that fails, he changes his strategy. He turns to something more subtle, more dangerous: confusion. Because if he can't take your life, he will try to take your clarity. He will cloud your mind with doubt, with fear, with voices that sound like your own but are filled with lies. He will attempt to separate you from your identity, from your purpose, from your connection with God, not by force, but by fog. Spiritual confusion is one of the most underestimated weapons of the enemy. It doesn't come with thunder and lightning. It comes with silence and uncertainty. It sneaks in during moments of waiting, when prayers seem unanswered and the heavens feel quiet. It whispers things like, maybe you were never chosen, or if God loved you, you wouldn't be going through this. And the danger is, if you don't recognize where it's coming from, you might start to believe it. But let me remind you of something sacred. Confusion is not of God. He is not the author of chaos. He is the architect of peace, the source of wisdom, the one who speaks truth even in silence. So if you are feeling lost, anxious, or spiritually off balance, it doesn't mean you've failed. It may just mean you're under attack. And you're under attack because you are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. This message is for those who've been called. For those who feel like they're walking through life with a target on their back. For those who've been wrestling with doubt, wondering if they're still on the right path. It's time to lift the fog. It's time to understand why the enemy is after you, and more importantly, why he can't succeed. The devil can't destroy you, so he tries to confuse you. But today, we expose his strategy. Today, we reclaim our clarity. Today, the chosen ones remember who they are. You were chosen for a purpose beyond this world. You didn't come into this world by accident. Whether your arrival was planned or unexpected, welcomed or rejected, smooth or marked by trauma, the moment you took your first breath, a divine purpose was ignited in you. And maybe no one told you this growing up. Maybe no one laid their hand on your head and said, "You are chosen." But the evidence was always there. The signs were written not in the ease of your life, but in its battles. Because the chosen ones rarely have it easy. They are not called to comfort. They are called to carry weight, to carry light, to carry responsibility. Being chosen doesn't look like what most people imagine. It's not wrapped in applause or wrapped in gold. It doesn't mean you'll always feel powerful or certain. It often means you'll be misunderstood, set apart, even abandoned. You'll be placed in situations where it feels like everything around you is falling apart. And still, God says, stay. You'll endure seasons of silence from heaven, when your prayers feel like they're echoing back at you. And still, God whispers, trust me. You'll lose things, friends, opportunities, stability, and yet God will not let you walk away. That's the mark of someone chosen. You can't run from the calling even when you try. Many people assume that being chosen by God means life will unfold in favor. But let me tell you something real. Favor doesn't always feel good. Favor comes with fire. Favor comes with testing. And the greater your purpose, the greater your pressure. It's not because God is punishing you. It's because he's preparing you. Preparing you to carry something sacred. To walk in rooms others are not invited into. To influence lives that you haven't even met yet. And if you feel like you've been breaking, maybe it's because God has been making room in you for what he's about to pour. You see, when God chooses someone, he doesn't choose based on perfection. He chooses based on posture. A heart that is willing. A spirit that is surrendered. A person who is not obsessed with looking powerful, but with being faithful. Someone who says, God, I don't understand, but I'll follow. That's who he chooses. And when he chooses you, he doesn't consult your resume. He doesn't care how messy your past is, how broken your family was, or how many mistakes you've made. In fact, he often uses the broken, not just to prove a point, but to fulfill his promise. So don't count yourself out just because others did. Don't assume your suffering disqualifies you. It may be the very reason you were chosen in the first place. The devil knows who you are, even when you don't. That's why the attacks on your life started before you even knew how to fight back. That's why rejection came early. That's why people betrayed you without cause. That's why depression, anxiety, and shame tried to take you out. The enemy saw what was planted in you, and his mission has always been to abort your purpose before it could fully bloom. But here you are, still standing, still breathing, still seeking God. That alone is proof that he failed. And while the devil cannot stop what God has started, he will still try to interrupt it. He will distract you, confuse you, tire you out, not because you're weak, but because you are dangerous. Because when you finally understand who you are and what you carry, hell has a problem. So the enemy wages war, not always through catastrophe, but through subtlety, through spiritual exhaustion, through relational chaos, through the lies you tell yourself when you're tired and uncertain. He knows that if he can get you to believe you're not chosen, you'll stop living like you are. But I came to remind you today, you are chosen. You are not random. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. God's hand is still on you, even if the season is hard. His calling hasn't changed just because your circumstances did. He doesn't revoke the anointing when life gets messy. In fact, sometimes, it's in the mess that he reveals the most. He teaches you to hear his voice in the storm. He teaches you to trust him when the path is dark. He allows the shaking, not to harm you, but to awaken you. Chosen ones, you must remember, you are not called to blend in. You are called to stand out. And yes, that comes with pressure. That comes with loneliness. That comes with responsibility. But it also comes with power, with vision, with divine protection. What you carry is holy. What you carry is generational. What you carry has the power to break chains not only off your life, but off the lives of others. That's why the enemy hates you. That's why the confusion keeps coming. That's why the attacks intensify the closer you get to breakthrough. But don't let the storm make you forget the promise. Don't let the pressure make you forget the preparation. And don't let the silence make you forget that God is still speaking. Sometimes he speaks through the waiting. Sometimes he speaks through the weeping. Sometimes he speaks by not removing the obstacle, but by giving you the strength to endure it. And that, too, is evidence of being chosen. You were set apart before you ever knew it. You were marked by heaven for something hell cannot cancel. And no matter how the enemy tries to confuse you, discourage you, or wear you down, the truth remains. You are still chosen. Your story is still unfolding, and your purpose is still alive. So hold your head up, wipe your tears, and keep walking, because the next chapter of your life is not destruction. It's revelation. And once you realize that you were chosen for something beyond this world, you will stop begging the world to understand you. You were never meant to fit in here. You were meant to change it. The devil can't destroy you, but he studies you. If you've made it this far, it means the devil tried to destroy you, and he failed. That's not a small statement. That's a spiritual truth that needs to sink deep into your soul. Because if the enemy had his way, you wouldn't even be alive right now. You wouldn't be sane. You wouldn't have peace. You wouldn't still be reaching for God. But here you are, not perfect, not untouched, not without scars, but undefeated. And that's the one thing the devil hates the most about God's chosen ones. They don't die in the wilderness. They rise in it. You see, destruction was his first strategy. He sent the storm to kill you. He sent the betrayal to break you. He used people you loved as weapons against your soul. And yet, none of it worked. Every trap he set, God turned into a lesson. Every attack that should have buried you became the soil where your faith grew stronger. That's when the enemy had to change tactics. If he couldn't destroy you physically, he would begin to study you. He would watch you closely, waiting, lurking in the shadows. Not because he's powerful, but because he's desperate. Make no mistake, the devil studies patterns. He doesn't come up with new tricks. He just studies your reactions. He learns your wounds. He memorizes your triggers. He listens to your words when you're angry, tired, discouraged. He looks for any opening, any moment of weakness, where he can slip in unnoticed and sow just enough doubt to make you question everything you once knew for sure. He doesn't always roar like a lion. Sometimes he whispers like a friend. Sometimes he dresses like an opportunity. Sometimes he sounds like your own voice. And if you're not spiritually alert, you'll confuse his lies for your logic. That's why the chosen ones must live with discernment. Because not every door is from God. Not every connection is divine. Not every emotion is true. Some of it is warfare disguised as ordinary life. The devil studies your relationships. He knows which people exhaust your spirit. He knows which voices plant insecurity in your mind. He'll send distractions in the form of desire. He'll send confusion packaged as companionship. He doesn't need to drag you into sin with force. He just needs you distracted long enough to delay your purpose. And once you're off course, the confusion begins. The fog sets in. And suddenly, you're not sure if you're still chosen. That's his goal. Not just to hurt you, but to get you to question who you are. The enemy knows he can't touch your calling, but he wants to convince you to abandon it yourself. He wants to frustrate you so deeply that you say, I give up. He wants to make you believe that your obedience isn't worth the pain. He wants to surround you with voices that sound spiritual but carry no truth. He wants to turn your journey into a maze. And the moment you lose clarity, you become easier to manipulate. But hear this. When the enemy starts studying you, it means he's threatened by you. He doesn't waste time on people who have no impact. He doesn't track those who pose no threat to his kingdom. If he's watching you, it's because you carry something sacred. You walk in a level of favor he can't stand. Your obedience is causing ripple effects you can't even see yet. And because he knows he can't undo the anointing on your life, he'll try to make you walk away from it. That's why spiritual warfare often comes in seasons of transition. Right before you level up. Right before the breakthrough. Right before the clarity arrives. That's when the attacks intensify. That's when confusion sets in. Not because you're failing, but because you're close. You're too close to destiny for the enemy to sit back and do nothing. So he studies. He observes. He schemes. But what he doesn't realize is that while he's watching you, God is watching him. God never takes his eyes off his chosen ones. Even in the middle of spiritual warfare, heaven is still in command. The devil can only operate within boundaries God has allowed, and only for a season. Whatever he studies, God sees. Whatever he tries to manipulate, God can redeem. So don't panic when you're under pressure. It means you're being refined, not ruined. You're being tested, not rejected. When the devil studies you, he's hoping to find you disconnected from God, isolated, bitter, exhausted. But the most powerful thing you can do in those moments is stay rooted in the truth. Don't run to distractions. Don't chase false affirmations. Don't retreat into your past. Stay grounded in the Word. Stay present in worship. Stay open to correction. Because the moment you shift your eyes back to God, the devil loses visibility. This is why God doesn't always remove the pressure. Sometimes he allows it, not to destroy you, but to show you what you're made of. To show you that you can withstand the storm without losing your mind. To show you that you can walk through fire and not smell like smoke. To show the devil that even after all the attacks, you're still a warrior. Still chosen. Still anointed. You don't need to fear the devil's study. You just need to remain aware of it. You need to understand the game so you can play with spiritual intelligence. You need to stop reacting to every attack and start discerning the source. You need to stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start declaring, this means I must be close to something great. Because the more intense the opposition, the more important the assignment. So don't be discouraged by the pressure. Be informed. Be equipped. Be alert. The devil is studying, yes, but he's not in control. God's hand is still on your life. And as long as you walk with him, no amount of strategy, no level of manipulation, no demonic scheme can stop what God has ordained for you. Let the devil watch. Let him take notes. Because every time he thinks he's found your weakness, God reveals your strength. Every time he plots confusion, God brings a new level of clarity. Every time he sends a storm, God plants a seed. And every time he tries to derail your path, God reroutes it for greater glory. You are chosen. You are watched. You are tested. But you are also covered. And that's why, no matter what the devil knows about you, he still can't defeat you. Confusion is his favorite weapon. If the devil can't destroy you, and he knows he can't, then he turns to the next most effective strategy, confusion. Confusion is not as loud as destruction. It doesn't come with explosions or thunder. It comes quietly. It creeps in slowly. It doesn't try to tear you down overnight. It aims to wear you down over time. Because the enemy understands that a chosen one who is confused about their identity, their calling, or their relationship with God is just as vulnerable as someone who is broken. Confusion is the weapon of choice because it's deceptive. It feels internal. It disguises itself as your own thoughts. The devil doesn't need to forcefully separate you from God. He just needs to make you feel like you're already distant. He doesn't need to take away your purpose. He just needs to make you believe it was never real to begin with. That's how he wins. He doesn't need to push you off the path. He only needs to blur it enough that you stop walking. When confusion sets in, your mind becomes the battlefield. You start to question things you once knew without a doubt. You wonder if you really heard God. You replay past decisions, second-guessing every step. You hesitate to pray. You avoid worship. You distance yourself from people who speak truth because their clarity becomes uncomfortable in your clouded space. The longer confusion lingers, the more disconnected you begin to feel, not just from God, but from yourself. The enemy understands that clarity leads to action, and action leads to impact. So he must stop your clarity. He must jam your signal. He wants your spiritual radar scrambled. He wants your discernment dulled. And he uses subtle tools, not overt evil, but emotionally charged moments. A missed opportunity, a prayer that seems unanswered, a betrayal that leaves you wounded. And before you know it, you're not just dealing with disappointment, you're doubting the voice of God. Let's be clear, confusion is not from God. He is not the author of confusion. He is the author of peace. He is the giver of wisdom. He is the source of direction. And when he speaks, it may challenge you, but it never leaves you paralyzed. God's instructions are sometimes hard to accept, but never impossible to understand. So when confusion takes over, it's a red flag that you're under spiritual warfare. The devil also knows that confusion thrives in isolation. That's why he works so hard to separate you from those who carry light. He doesn't want you around people who remind you of your identity. He doesn't want you in environments where your gifts are affirmed. He wants you isolated, overwhelmed, and overthinking. Because when you're isolated, you're easier to lie to. When you're tired, you're easier to manipulate. And when you're spiritually malnourished, you're easier to mislead. He loves to confuse you about God's nature. He plants doubts like, if God really loved you, why would you be in this situation? Or, if you were really chosen, why would it hurt so much? And suddenly, you're not just confused about your future, you're confused about the very character of the one who called you. That's his ultimate goal, to sever your confidence in the God who chose you, to erode your trust so subtly that you don't even notice it's slipping away. Sometimes, confusion doesn't come through disaster. It comes through delay. You were expecting the answer by now. You were expecting the door to open. You were certain the breakthrough was close. But it didn't happen. Not yet. And in that waiting room, confusion shows up. It whispers that maybe you missed it. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you were never chosen at all. And in that moment, the devil doesn't need to do anything else. You've already started to unplug from your assignment. But here's the truth. Waiting is not confusion. Delay is not denial. Silence is not abandonment. The fact that things haven't happened yet doesn't mean they won't. It simply means you're still in training, still being refined, still being hidden until the right moment. And that hiddenness is sacred. You're not being punished, you're being preserved. Sometimes, God keeps you in the dark so your light can grow strong enough to shine when it matters most. You see, when God calls you, he gives you a word. And that word is your anchor. Confusion happens when you let go of the word and start clinging to the world. You start seeking validation from outside sources. You start interpreting God's silence through your fear. And that's when things get murky. But the chosen ones don't live by emotions. They live by conviction. They don't panic in the dark. They remember what God said in the light. You must learn to fight confusion not with arguments, but with alignment. Align yourself back with the word. Go back to what God said. Go back to the promises you wrote down. Go back to the moments of clarity you've had in prayer. Remind yourself that the storm you're in doesn't erase the vision God gave you. Remind yourself that just because you feel unsure doesn't mean you're off track. Feelings are not facts. Confusion is not your identity. You are chosen, and chosen ones walk by faith, not by sight. Clarity begins when you stand still. When you stop trying to figure it all out on your own and return to the source. When you stop listening to 1,000 voices and tune your ears back to the one that matters. That's when the fog starts to lift. That's when peace returns. That's when direction comes back into focus. Not because everything around you has changed, but because something inside you has. So if you find yourself in a season of confusion, don't give in to despair. Don't let it trick you into walking away from what you were born to do. Don't allow the enemy to manipulate your mind with fear and false logic. Instead, stand on truth. Stand on your calling. Stand on your history with God. You didn't get this far by accident. You got here because you're chosen. And if you're under attack, it's only because you're a threat. The devil's favorite weapon is confusion, but it only works on those who forget who they are. And you, child of God, are not easily fooled. You are not easily shaken. You were built for clarity. You were born for impact. You were called for such a time as this. The fog won't last forever. Your clarity will return. And when it does, you'll move forward with a fire the devil can't handle. Clarity comes when you stand still with God. When the storm rages, the temptation is always to run, to fix, to figure things out. We panic, we analyze, we overthink. We try to control what feels uncontrollable. But there's a divine principle that goes against everything our emotions scream for in those moments. And yet, it's the key to restoring clarity. God says, "Be still and know that I am God." Not do more. Not panic. Not solve it yourself. Be still. Stand still. Rest your soul in Him. Because clarity doesn't come in chaos. It comes in stillness. You see, the enemy thrives in movement, not progress, but frantic motion. He wants you to exhaust yourself chasing answers. He wants you to burn out trying to prove your worth. He wants you to lose sight of your calling while running in circles. But God doesn't play that game. God doesn't scream above the noise. He whispers in stillness. And if you keep running, you'll miss Him. If you keep striving, you'll confuse movement with purpose. But the moment you stand still, truly still, you'll realize He's been speaking the entire time. Stillness is not laziness. It is spiritual posture. It means you refuse to be driven by fear. It means you stop looking for quick fixes and start listening for divine instruction. It means you recognize that no amount of rushing will make God move faster. He operates on eternal timing, not emotional pressure. Stillness is where revelation happens. It's where your spirit realigns. It's where the fog begins to clear and you remember what you forgot in the chaos, that God is still in control. There's power in pausing, power in shutting out the noise and sitting with God, power in choosing worship over worry, silence over scrambling, faith over frenzy. The devil wants you reacting. God calls you to respond. The difference? Reaction is fear-driven. Response is spirit-led. And you can't respond properly if your soul is tangled up in confusion, exhaustion, and hurry. When you stand still with God, you reclaim your spiritual authority. You remember who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. You're no longer a slave to your circumstances. You stop letting confusion define your next step. You stop needing immediate answers and start trusting eternal truth. And that's when peace returns. Not because the storm ends, but because your eyes are no longer on the waves. They're on the one who walks on them. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in the Bible didn't come through striving. They came through stillness. Moses didn't part the Red Sea by rushing around in panic. He said, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Elijah didn't hear God in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He heard Him in a gentle whisper. Jesus didn't rebuke the storm from a place of anxiety. He spoke peace because He carried peace. Stillness is a form of spiritual warfare. It is a declaration that says, "I will not be moved by fear. I will not let confusion rule me. I may not have all the answers, but I have the presence of God, and that is enough." And when you stand in that kind of confidence, the enemy loses his grip. Because confusion can't cling to a soul anchored in truth. The fog can't blind a heart that's fixed on God. You don't need to force your way through every season. Some breakthroughs come when you stop pushing and start posturing. When you go back to the secret place. When you shut the door, quiet your mind, and say, "Speak, Lord. I'm listening." That is where clarity flows. That is where strategy is born. That is where God begins to show you not just what to do next, but who you are becoming in the process. It's in stillness that your strength is renewed. that your soul takes a deep breath, that your heart stops racing and starts receiving. You can't receive if you're always reaching. You can't hear if you're always talking. You can't see clearly if you're always moving. But when you stand still, everything changes. Heaven begins to speak. Your discernment returns. Your confidence is restored. And suddenly, what felt foggy becomes focused. What felt distant feels close again. You may be in a season right now where nothing makes sense. You're praying, but God feels silent. You're obeying, but the reward hasn't come. You're walking, but the path is unclear. I want to tell you, that doesn't mean you're lost. It may just mean you've reached the point where God wants you to stop trying to figure it all out and simply trust. Trust that He's still guiding. Trust that He's still present. Trust that His silence is not His absence. Trust that your steps are still ordered even when they feel uncertain. The devil wants you to keep spinning, keep questioning, keep running, because he knows that if you ever truly pause, if you ever truly rest in God, he loses his foothold. Confusion loses its power in the presence of peace. And peace comes from stillness. That's why stillness is so threatening to hell. Because a still believer is a dangerous believer. A still believer hears clearly. A still believer walks boldly. A still believer isn't manipulated by fear or distracted by noise. A still believer can't be moved because their roots go deep. So stop striving. Stop explaining. Stop fighting battles that don't belong to you. Return to the quiet place. Open your Bible. Fall on your face in prayer. Pour your heart out. Then be still. And let the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and mind. Let His voice rise above the confusion. Let His presence quiet the war in your soul. You were never meant to live in a fog. You were never meant to wander endlessly, questioning your worth or your purpose. You were chosen, and clarity is your inheritance. But to receive it, you must slow down. You must silence the enemy's noise. You must trust the stillness. Because that's where God speaks. That's where healing happens. That's where confusion dies and destiny awakens.